Welcome, everybody. We are glad you're here with us. If you'll look at that smiling face over on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll notice we're with Dustin Harris, the appraisal coach, and a very good friend of mine. Now, Dustin and I are going to talk about something that you probably haven't thought about before, because we're going to talk about not so much appraising, but we're going to talk about the appraisal business, especially in what is going on in these convoluted times. So, Dustin, first of all, howdy, welcome. It's good to be
Oh,
with you
Tim,
again.
this is so exciting for me. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do for the industry, and it's an honor to be on your program. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And Dustin, let's talk about this from the standpoint of what you do. You coach appraisers to do well in business. So we're sitting in a situation where, well, for example, in some cities, it's become very difficult to get into downtown areas,
Yeah,
and
difficult is
to
understating it. Sure.
put it euphemistically. So we've got situations where appraisers may not be able to do as many appraisals as they were able to do before, or they may not be able to access their offices, or we don't know about the stability of neighborhoods. We don't know about the stability of law enforcement and city
Sure.
governments and stuff like that. So while those don't affect appraisers directly, they do affect appraisers at least tangentially.
Mm,
So from a standpoint of appraisal business, keeping the business going, keeping the business relevant,
mm.
still being able to get the phone to ring, still being able to have an income on which to pay taxes. What are your thoughts about the appraisal business and where it's going right now?
Boy, that's always my goal, Tim, is to pay more taxes. I'm glad you brought that aspect up.
Good,
Uh,
good. I got to make you happy.
No, we as you pointed out, Tim, we're in. I think you used the term convoluted times, and it is a challenging time for appraisers. But Tim, this is not new in the sense that times are always challenging for appraisers. Things are always changing. They joke that the only constant is change, and I think that has escalated when it comes to appraisals, especially if you're involved directly and mostly with lender work. Lender work is very volatile, as you know. It's up, it's down. It's dependent on so many factors, including interest rates and the ability to lend and the ability to get access to cash and cash flow and the different policies that we see from lenders. And then on top of that, the AMCs. And it's a challenging time. And I think that's why appraisers sometimes get discouraged. But my suggestion and my recommendation is that we step back and understand, first of all, that our clients are not always in control and really essentially when it comes down to it are not in control of our business. We are. And I think appraisers sometimes get this attitude, if you will, and it's easy to do. We get in this grind of day to day, and we sometimes step back and kind of feel like we're run by our clients. I've heard that when you're self-employed, you don't have a boss, you have many. And I don't know that I believe that. I still think that as a self-employed individual, you have control, you have the ability, and if you'll take the reins, there's a great deal of things that we can be doing, Tim, to make sure that we steer our business in the right direction. If you would like, let me give you just a couple of examples.
Please.
When it comes to change, it's important for appraisers to understand that they cannot box themselves in, and that's on many, many different levels. They cannot box themselves in as far as their geography, for example. I know appraisers like to focus on a small segment, and though that can be good to really truly be the expert in that segment, if you've got a situation in downtown Seattle where there's a coordinates that you can't go into because there's no protection and there's a possibility of violence, and an appraiser decides they're not going to go in there, but that's their business and that's their geography, well, they're in trouble. Now, if they can shift work to other geographies that they're competent in, that they have experience in, well, that's one solution. Another solution, Tim, would be to think outside the box when it comes to the types of appraisal observations or lack thereof that we're doing. As you know, I defer to you on these types of things because you're the USPAP instructor, you're the USPAP expert. but USPAP does not require an inspection for an appraisal to get done. So are there other ways that we can gather credible information about the subject property in order to do a proper and good job and have a reliable report out there? And number three, the thing that comes to mind, Tim, is the ability to be able to diversify the types of work that you're doing. I talked earlier about lender work. Well, what about non-lender work? What about direct lender work? What about foreclosures and government work? I mean, there's so many opportunities out there that appraisers sometimes don't take advantage of because lender work is easy. Let's face it, it's the low-hanging fruit. To get on signed up on AMC lists is very, very simple, and it's quick, and it usually is seamless. And sure, we deal with some challenges there. But if that's your only source of income, you might be in a more difficult situation.
Dustin, you mentioned lenders. Let's talk about lenders for a minute. Obviously, we've got to keep our businesses relevant to the lending community. Otherwise,
Mhm.
there's no business out there. Okay, you're in a big city. There's been a horrible situation downtown. Businesses are closed. Some of them, for whatever reason, have to be boarded up. Part of what it is we do is we report risk to our
Mhm.
clients. What are the risks of investing in the mortgages in neighborhood X? And obviously, we've gone from the cities where there was no more than typical risk
Mhm.
to situations where there's been a great deal of damage. There's going to be some stigma attached to going back to downtown, at least from the standpoint of the business people, because they don't want to have to invest a couple of $100,000 in inventory merely to know that uh, someone can break in and steal it literally while those people are stealing it on television.
Right.
So, from a standpoint of the lender, from a standpoint of risk, from a standpoint of keeping our businesses relevant, how is it that we're going to report to our clients that there is a greater risk in investing in particular neighborhoods than there was in the past,
Right.
without condemning or without trying to say, and what happened in the past is going to happen every night in the future? Obviously, we can't
Sure.
predict the future,
Sure.
but
Sure.
again, from a standpoint of keeping our businesses relevant, how are we going to explain risk factors to our clients, given the fact that now risks have increased significantly,
Right.
especially the risks
Right.
of owning a business in some of these downtown areas?
Well, Tim, you've really hit on an issue that I think separates the mice from the men, if you will, and women, of course. The difference between, and we get these questions all the time. Well, is the appraiser going to be relevant into the future? Right? Are AVMs taking over the appraisal world? We've heard these fear. I've been in this 24 years, Tim, and I've heard that from day one. In fact, my dad has been in it longer than that, and I heard it from him. When drive-bys first came out, it was the end of the appraisal world as we know it. In the early 2000s, AMC or AVMs rather, were going to take over the world in computer-assisted valuation, and certainly those things have gotten better. And over the last few weeks, obviously, we've seen a lot of change in the scope of work with regard to appraisals. And I know some appraisers are fearful regarding the future. Am I really going to be relevant into the future? And your question really hits on, in my opinion, what's going to be the difference between the future for appraisers' demise and the future for appraisers' success. And it really comes down to understanding and knowing your local market. In other words, a computer can do things all day long, and computers can crunch data. And by the way, I'm not discounting that. Data is essential, and understanding that data is essential. But in the end, it takes a human being to be able to analyze that data and make sure that the computer is not just taking ones and zeros and mixing them up and spitting out an answer. It takes an appraiser to sit back and understand what's going on in the news, what's going on politically, what's going on socially, what's going on in so many aspects. Now, this thing I would caution, Tim, is that we don't get in the habit or get in this mode as appraisers of patting ourselves on the back too hardly, meaning that we over report. And I've seen that as well with this COVID-19, with the pandemic. I've talked to appraisers who are very willing to talk about the changes in the market where there haven't been yet, Tim. And I think that's a concern. Just because we perceive that the market is going to change doesn't mean that it has or will. I'll give you a quick example, Tim. I've been keeping really close tabs on my local market. I've been running stats on a weekly basis, and I've been looking at things like numbers of sales, numbers of pendings, sales price, average sales price, days on market. So many factors that really indicate what a market is doing. And despite my emotion saying, well, definitely the market's going to go down. How could it not with the lockdown order and with appraisers and realtors and buyers and sellers all staying in their homes? How could the market not go down? Well, guess what, Tim? In my local market, in every single segment, the market is up, not greatly, but it's up. Days on market are down, pendings are up, numbers of listings are up. I mean, it's a complete opposite of what I would think emotionally. That's why we as appraisers need to look at the data, understand the data, and not over-report just because we think something's going to happen.
Okay, now you live in a relatively rural area,
Yep.
and if I recall the news correctly, there have not been any major issues in Boise or Idaho Falls or anything like that.
I had to stop for a cattle drive yesterday,
You
Tim.
had to
So
stop for a
that was
okay,
quick.
well, all right, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. Um, but not everybody gets to appraise, and then you do a lot of work in Wyoming too.
Mhm.
So not everybody gets to appraise in what is a rural area. Okay,
Sure.
so you live someplace in Orange County, California,
Mhm.
where it isn't particularly rural. It's
Mhm.
uh, while there are a lot of suburbs, we won't debate that, but you're relatively close to Los Angeles, for example. Now, how is that, if at all, going to affect you? You were mentioning that you're looking at the stats for your neighborhood, blah blah blah. How is that going to affect appraisers in more urban areas or
Mhm.
more suburban areas when they find that, ooh, well, things are tending to slow down a little bit?
Right.
What is
Right.
it that they need to do from a standpoint of their businesses to continue to remain relevant?
Oh man, what an excellent question. As you know, Tim, I coach appraisers across the nation, and I have hundreds of appraisers in my all-star team, and I've got appraisers in the Los Angeles area. I've got 4 appraisers in the Minneapolis area, and we, of course, have been talking very, very frequently regarding what's going on in their local markets, and that really is the key, Tim. It's not up to Dustin Harris to understand the market in Los Angeles or Seattle or Minneapolis. It's up to the appraisers who are boots on the ground there, understanding their local markets. And to remain relevant, I think is your question, Tim. Um, First of all, they need to understand what their market is doing, and that means they can't just take 3 comps, make quick adjustments, and turn in a report. There's a whole lot more that goes into the appraisal process than the appraisal report. We've got standard 1, right, which is the process. We've got standard 2, which is the reporting, and of course they work together. But I fear that too many appraisers don't take the time, the effort, and the hard work that it takes to do standard 1, and that is truly understanding and analyzing your market. That's why the lenders are going to keep coming to you, because they, let's face it, I mean, I hate to admit it, I mean, tar and feather me here, but Zillow's pretty damn good. It really is. It's
We'll
not
cut that. We'll
great.
cut that part out, Dustin.
It's not great. It's not great, but I mean, it gets in the ballpark a lot of times, and especially when it comes to congruent, tract type model home neighborhoods, right? It is very good in those types of neighborhoods for reason. It's easy. I mean, ask any appraiser who appraises that type of neighborhood. That type of appraisal is easy. Now, I think the lenders are still looking for data, and I think in that sense the appraisers are relevant. But it's more than that, Tim. It's not just looking at sales, looking at listings and coming up with a value. It's truly understanding the ebbs and flows of a market. And if an appraiser wants to remain relevant into the future with this encroaching technology that is getting better and better all the time, An appraiser needs to remain relevant because they are the local expert. Not only do we need to be the local expert, Tim, but we've got to show that we're the local expert.
Let's talk about expertise for a minute. And you mentioned that you've spent a lot of time looking at the available data
Hmm.
in the Idaho Falls area. I'm
Hmm.
assuming that's your major MLS.
Yeah, yeah.
And your the days on market or haven't gone up, and sale prices or whatever they're doing, etc. Destin, from purely a standpoint of the statistics, would it be possible for an appraiser to put these together to get these data saying, oh, look, compared to 12 months ago, days on market's down, compared to 3 months ago, days on market stable, not 1004MC stuff, but the
Hmm.
actual
Right.
charts and graphs and the appraiser's interpretation of what's going on. Is this an area of business that appraisers are missing? Because obviously the lenders out there want to know what's going on. They're not privy to MLS data. They can probably get it, but they're not privy to it.
Yep.
Whereas, and if an appraiser were to provide it, even free, if an
Hmm.
appraiser were to provide it, would that be something to help an appraiser keep his or her business relevant?
Three answers to that, Tim. Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, I'm
Appraisers
glad we narrowed it down. Thank you, Dustin.
appraisers need, I mean, I'm glad you brought this up, Tim, because appraisers, again, they need to not only understand their market, but they need to help. And this is where marketing comes in, right? They need to help their clients understand that they're not the run of the mill appraiser, that there may be 10 appraisers in that local area that that lender or that AMC could have chosen, but they will continue to go back to that appraiser because that appraiser not only understands the market, but has the ability to be able to put it in understandable fashion for the reader. Remember, the report needs to be legible. And I'm not just talking about handwriting here. I'm talking about a typical user being able to understand what is really going on in a market because the appraiser didn't just fill out or print out an MC sheet. They didn't just mark stable because they didn't want to get a revision request from somebody saying, well, wait a minute, what do you mean it's increasing? How come you didn't make a time adjustment? Or they didn't put decreasing, heaven forbid. What do you mean the market's decreasing? Are we in for a recession here? So appraisers will just keep marking stable, stable, stable because that's the easy box to mark. Well, folks, there is this ability for us, and this is where we need to remain relevant into the future, in my opinion, Tim, is that we need to understand the market, but more importantly, we need to help our readers understand the market as well.
So, by readers understanding the market, rather than just saying, well, according to 1004MC, days on market 12 months ago was 87, and
Hmm.
now it's down to 85 or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
We need to say 12 months ago, days on market was 87. Most recently, it's down to 85. And here's why. Is
Right,
that
right.
is that what you're implying?
Right, and we don't. Let's be honest. We don't always know why. I think if we can, understand, analyze the market, and be able to explain that to a listener or a reader, rather, of our report, and more importantly, to our clients, helping them to understand that we're not just doing an appraisal for $450, that we're truly the expert in the valuation profession here locally. That's what's going to keep them returning. And it's not just lenders. I've been talking about lenders because that's where the majority of my peers work, but non-lender work as well. What's going to cause an individual who is in the process of a bankruptcy or a divorce, which we have seen on the increase due to the pandemic? What's going to cause them to come to us versus our competition? Well, it's going to be those that understand, first of all, that we understand the market. Well, how do they know? They don't know us, right? Or, in some cases they might. It might be a neighbor, it might be a friend. And then, of course, you've got to, be careful about undue influence. But the bottom line is you need to be a marketer. Appraisers can't just continue to do what they've always done, sit by the fax machine and hope the orders come in. You've got to remain relevant. And one of the best ways to do that currently, Tim, is to get a website, to have a blog, to continually report what's going on in the marketplace. Because and I don't care if you're a lender, a direct lender, a national lender, an AMC, or a non-lender potential client, you're going to go to Google, and you're going to Google an appraiser in that area. If you don't know somebody and you need somebody, you go to your attorney and say, hey, we want a divorce. Well, we need an appraisal. Go out and find an appraiser. Well, who do you suggest? Well, I don't know. Then just Google it, right? That's what they're going to do. And they're going to look at 3 or 4 different websites. And if they all look the same, and I'm sorry, Tim, most appraiser websites look the same, and then they fall upon yours, and it has video and it has blogs and it has relevant information, guess who they're going to hire? The
They're
person
going to
who
hire my
understands the
wife
market.
because she did all the artwork on my
Right.
website.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
You
yeah,
do have a great website, Tim.
they're going to hire the appraiser who, for whatever reason, stands out. So
Exactly.
therefore, I think what you're saying is part of remaining relevant in these convoluted times is, by whatever legitimate, honest, ethical reason, an appraiser must stand out. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, but I want to be careful here because it's not fluff. It's not just window curtains. It's not just the prettiest website. It's truly someone, people are savvy, and customers are savvy, potential customers are savvy, and they know when you're just putting them on. They know when it's just a fancy, flashy website, and when they can really see data and know and understand, okay, this guy gets it, or this gal gets it. She understands the market and she understands how to report the market. That's the person I want doing my appraisal.
Okay, let's apply this to the practical. So you've been appraising for 10 years, never had any problem with the state. You keep up with your CE, blah, blah, blah. And you say, you wake up one morning and you go, you know what? I like appraising houses, but that cannot be the be all and end all of the appraisal world.
Sure.
What else can I do? So you say to yourself, okay, self, I want to do tax appeal work. I'm just pulling that out of the air.
Okay.
I want to do tax appeal work. And you say, now, I know a little bit about it. I don't know very much about it. I know a little bit about it. So I'm going to have to take some classes, and I'm probably going to have to get with an appraiser who does tax work so I can learn it. Now, that's probably also going to mean the appraiser is going to cut back to some extent the amount of, let's say, mortgage work they've been doing. So from purely a business standpoint, from a standpoint of keeping a business relevant, and you decide to go into tax work, you're going to take a hit, maybe a small hit, but you're going to take a hit in your income. Now, from a business standpoint, is it wise to take that hit while you're learning, while you're training, et cetera, or are you wiser to say, well, I don't want to take the hit and I'll just keep doing what I've been doing?
Great question. I am a big fan of understanding that with any success comes a step backward. I don't care if it's technology, if it's new clients, if it's a new scope of work, a new product. I mean, fill in the blank. Anything that is new and is not normal for you. Once it's normal, it's natural. And you have this flow, you have this rhythm, right? There's a certain number of hours, man hours, that it takes to get an appraisal from point A to point Z. And whenever you disrupt that, even if in the long run it will be good for you, there's going to be a step back. One of the challenges, for example, and I'm going to get to your question, I promised him, but as an example, somebody might say, well, I've always done paper and pen on my observations. I've always had grid paper, and I've sketched it out, and then I go back to the office and I type it into the computer, and it's always worked just fine. I've been doing that for 26 years and it's been great. And then they think, well, maybe I want to start using my phone or an iPad or some type of a tablet, right? And they get into this, and if you're not prepared for it, Tim, you're going to quit very, very quickly. I wrote a blog post years ago called the 10 House Challenge. People can find it on my website at theappraisercoach.com. And the 10 House Challenge is all about how you need to take 10 houses in a row. Okay, don't just pick and choose, but 10 houses in a row before you can get used to, or at least see the light at the end of the tunnel for any technology. And that includes a laser measure, that includes a tablet, that includes a variety of different things. Because here's the thing, what most appraisers do, and I think this is just human nature, is they try it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times and they say, well, Dustin, I tried it, it didn't work. It slowed me down. I wasn't used to it. I dropped it. I did this. I just can't see why this is beneficial. I'm going back to my old ways of doing things. Well, if you will take the time to really allow yourself to step back, and yes, that might mean a hit in income for a period of time. And going back to your question, if you're looking at doing tax appeal work or something new, first of all, a phrase I've been using with my coaching clients lately is education beyond CE. Okay, what does that mean? That means don't worry so much about the CE that your state tells you that you have to get. If you need some education, or if you want to move your business in a different direction, be willing to take education outside of CE. CE is one thing and that's a requirement, fine, whatever. But do we believe in ourselves to learn something new? And if you're not particularly proficient at tax appeal work, but that's a relevant aspect of the business that you would like to get involved in, well, then do it. Take some classes, find a mentor, talk with other appraisers. You know, one of the great things about the All-Star team is we talk openly daily about these types of things. An appraiser will get on and say, hey guys, I'm thinking about doing tax appeal work. I've never done it before. Help me. And instead of being belittled and put down, and other appraisers saying, well, if you haven't done it before, you can't do it in the future. What do you think you are? That's not the way we act in the All-Star team. Everybody is in there to say, hey, I've done this. Let me show you a couple things. Hey, I tried that, and let me give you some pitfalls to watch out for. We're there to help each other out. But the bottom line, Tim, is you have to step back. And you know, as the old saying goes, you take one step backward to take two steps forward. I would expand that and say, take a step backward, maybe even half a step backward to take 5, 6, 10 steps forward. Because these new products, these new technologies, they will bless your life ongoing and your business to be more successful.
So, from a standpoint of education, and to transition to, again, tax appeal work merely as an example,
Mhm.
uh, they're probably elite. I'm fairly involved in CE, and I don't know any classes, any CE classes
Mhm.
available to teach appraisers how to do tax appeal work, mostly because it's different in each state. Therefore, there probably couldn't be anything universal applicable to it. So you're saying, okay, your education might not necessarily be sitting in a classroom or
Exactly.
sitting in front of a computer
Yep.
screen, as we are right now, but it might be calling Dustin. You know, look, I live here in Idaho, and I know you know tax appeal work, and I want to hire you for 5 hours to tell me about it, and then I want to hang around with you and see what you do and how you do it. Is that the kind of
Right.
education you're talking about?
Absolutely, and beyond that, you know, it's a community of appraisers who work together. It may not be necessarily just one quote unquote mentor that you go to say, "Hey, teach me how to do this." It might be a group, as we talked about earlier, a community of appraisers. It might be YouTube. It might be, you know, it might be getting on the online forums and googling some things. It might be looking at samples. It might be going to your local tax assessment office and say, hey, if I were to appeal my taxes, what would you need from me in order to make me relevant? Just hypothetically, right? I mean, they're public servants. They should answer that question. Learn what you need to do in your local market in combination with other experts out there who have been doing this for years and years and years, and put together a product. And of course, you know, you're using the tax appeal uh, product as an example, but this is, you know, divorce, this is estates, this is bankruptcy, this is bail bond work, this is easements, this is it goes on and on and on. This is different types of lender work, direct lending work, private money lending work. I mean, there's so much stuff out there that we appraisers, unfortunately, and I as guilty as anybody, you know, comfort is comfort, and we don't like to get outside our comfort zone. We like to stay in our bubble, and if our bubble is AMC's and doing this work, well, I'm telling you, Tim, the time has come and will come in the future that you can't hang your hat solely on AMC work. It's going to be up and it's going to be down, and nobody wants to be volatile. We need to put our eggs in more than one basket.
Okay, Dustin, thank you. As we run out of time, let me ask you one more question. And this is your answer. It's not, nobody has to pay any attention to it. It's just your answer.
Okay.
Now, you have been in the real estate business, excuse me, real estate appraisal business, either directly as you are now, or indirectly. You grew up with it because your father was
Hmm.
an appraiser.
Sure.
let us suppose that somehow you were able to step. What year did you start? 96?
96 was my trainee's license. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's suppose that it were possible to step back to 1996,
Okay.
and you were starting all over again, and you had the blessing then of knowing what you know now.
And I didn't have a mullet, by the way. I don't know. I didn't know.
Okay. We're going to leave any hair jokes totally untouched, Dustin.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Fair enough.
All right. Okay. You're 1996, but you knew then what you know now, which obviously is
Mm.
impossible, but you knew
Mm.
then what you know now.
Yeah.
What advice would you give a newbie appraiser relative to where they should go, how they should go there, and how long it should take them to get there?
Mm. Yeah, the biggest key phrase here is think and act outside the box. Tim, as you know my story, and I spent the first 12 years of my career doing what everybody else was doing, and as the phrase goes, getting what everybody else was getting. And there came a time when I had to step back and analyze, is this what I want to keep doing the rest of my life? I was working 60 hours plus every week, and I was literally living paycheck to paycheck. There were many, many months that I feared that I couldn't pay my bills, and I just knew there had to be a better way of doing things.
And
And
this was when even though you're trained as a teacher and you have an advanced degree in teaching, you were not teaching, you were in appraising, correct?
oh yeah, I was just yeah, absolutely. I was just appraising and just doing what my mentor, bless his heart, and other mentors around me, my peers, were doing. I figured, that's worked for years and years and years. But I'm telling you, Tim, there came a time when I had to wake up and realize that there's a reason that appraisers are complaining, and they still are doing it today. How can we keep doing this and this and the revision requests and the AMCs and the stupid this and the stupid that and I'm working evenings and I'm working weekends and I'm working holidays just to make ends meet. And there's far too many appraisers out there in that unfortunate situation. About halfway through my career, I've been doing this about 24 years. So about halfway, 50% of my career into it, about 12 years into it, I had to wake up and say, there's got to be a better way. And that better way for me was to be able to study and understand principles of success by studying individuals that I felt were successful, both living and dead, and put together some principles and then start to implement them into my own business, technology, human resources, systems, procedures, quality control. There's so much that goes into running a successful business, which allowed me to now say, okay, you know what? Now I'm working less than 30 hours a week, making far more as far as money goes, having far more time and ability to be free and be able to manage people rather than have to feel like I'm doing everything by myself. Still remaining relevant as far as the state goes and USPAP goes. I mean, there's the right way to do this, Tim. And if I could step back, I think your question was if I could step back to 1996 and do things over. Well, Tim, I wouldn't have spent the first 12 years living paycheck to paycheck and working my tail off. I would have in the very beginning said, you know what, it's one thing to be a good appraiser technician. And I think every appraiser needs to learn that side. We've been talking about it today. You can't be relevant if you don't understand your market and if you're not the valuation professional locally. But that's one thing. The other side of that is, can you run a business? And I often tell my students and my clients that you have to, speaking of hair and hats, you got to put your CEO hat on first in the morning. That's the first hat you put on. Because if your business isn't successful, then you don't have a job to come to. But if you're simply putting your technician or appraisal hat on every day, and the business kind of runs itself in the background, and you just kind of hope it works out, it's tough to remain relevant. And I'm not saying you'll go out of business, but you'll probably spend most of your career, as I did, working too much for far too little.
Dustin, my friend, thank you very much. Now, when someone needs to consult with the appraiser coach, how do they get in touch with you?
Oh, there's lots of ways to get a hold of me. Best thing is probably to go to my website, theappraisercoach.com. It's THE appraisercoach.com, not appraisal coach, but appraisercoach.com. You can email me, theappraisercoach.com. I'm on Facebook. You can even call 208-745-9330 is my number. Would love to help. My passion, I love appraising. Don't get me wrong, Tim. I really do. I enjoy it. I enjoy I do some high-end homes. I did a $5 million home yesterday in Jackson Hole. Absolutely gorgeous home up on the hill. Beautiful. I love this. I love what I do, but I absolutely have a passion for teaching and mentoring other appraisers.
And Dustin, for which I am grateful because I have turned to you in the past for your mentoring. Thank you.
Well, likewise, likewise. Thank you, Tim.
You're more than welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, fellow appraisers, thank you. We appreciate the fact that you've been with us. We've been interviewing Dustin Harris, the the appraiser coach. He gave you his address, his email address, his phone number. If you need to get in touch with him, please do. That is going to help you remain relevant in your business in these convoluted times. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
Tim. It's been a
we're
pleasure.
clear.